Koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Na mihi nui ki a koutou, nau mai, haere mai ki tēnei hui o tēnei rā. He rangi pai mō tēnei kaupapa I tēnei rā. Ko Sue Watson toku ingoa e noho ana au ki te motu ārairoa, ko Waihe ki te motu, ko Ngāti Pāo te mana whenua, ko Piritahi te marae, and acknowledging as well the whenua on which we stand here, although it might actually be reclaimed land, I'm never sure, but there's some seabed underneath. And of course, acknowledging Ngāti Whātua as mana whenua of this land. And a warm welcome to you all, to let you know as well that we do have people joining us from around the motu, and I know there's somebody from Melbourne I saw on the list who's in one of our programs. Special welcome to you. And of course, all of those of you in the room. And yeah, really interesting looking at the attendee list. So every time Connected Leadership does an event, we get a whole different mix, mostly women. Nice to see a few of the tāne in the room. Kia ora. Now you know how it feels. Oh, sorry. In the property and infrastructure sectors. But you know, there are women leading in those sectors, and quite a lot of them are in this room today. So the kaupapa for today is leadership driving transformation, a new era for Kāinga ora. And it's a new era in many ways. In fact, there's probably been many eras for Kāinga ora because the organisation changes depending on the political and fiscal environment of the time. So they are very nimble and agile. But it's also a new era because Kāinga ora has its first ever woman in the chief executive role. And I'm very proud to say, and I will introduce you to Tracy Taylor, who is a graduate of the Connected Leadership programs and has also been a really strong contributor to our programs, because that's how she rolls. She's incredibly generous as a leader and is very committed to bringing other women in leadership. I've known Tracy for quite some time, and many of you will know her when she was in her high-profile role as the chief executive of Yellow. And whenever I say that, I look at your beautiful yellow blazer and I say, remember those yellow things that used to come in the letterbox? Remember that we took straight to the recycling bin? Okay. And then, of course, Tracy was responsible for moving the business digital. That was another major transformation that she led and supported the SME ecosystem in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But she went into Kāinga ora probably maybe a year or two ago on a contract role as head of people and culture, or GM people and culture. And as of December, she's now the chief executive. So that's worth a round of applause, isn't it? So yeah, and Tracy is also an experienced governor and director, including on a board, was Diversity Works now Te Uru Tangata, and another really important partner for Connected Leadership and doing great work in increasing the number and diversity of people coming to leadership in Aotearoa. I'd also like to introduce Caroline McDowell. Caroline's title is the GM Housing Delivery Group from Kāinga ora. Was rereading your LinkedIn today, Caroline. Very extensive background at scale in property development, both in the private sector and the public sector in New Zealand. And you've been at Kāinga ora for 6 years. So you have gone through, the roller coasters and has been one of the leaders leading the transformation. And I know you're just so crucial to the delivery program, which is massive. And you're going to hear about that today. Caroline's also a board member on the Property Council of New Zealand. So I'd also like to introduce Leonie Freeman, as many of you will know, as the CEO for the past 7 years. We should have had your photo on there. So Leonie is the Chief Executive of Property Council New Zealand. And again, Leonie's had extensive public and private sector property experience, including in real estate. Many of you will remember her from that. And you're such a powerful advocate for the sector, Leonie, and a great spokesperson. And I saw you also used to work at Housing New Zealand. Exactly, back in the day, all roads lead. So Caroline and Tracy are our sort of keynote speakers today. I'm looking forward to hearing. I don't know exactly what they're going to share, so I'm all ears. Many of you will know I've been governing in the community, which is broadly the public housing sector, for the last 14 years. So I'm absolutely passionate about the role of public housing in Aotearoa, and I will mention that Kāinga Ora very kindly built us a building recently, 52 brand new single bed units for low income seniors, which Haumaru Housing, which I'm on the board of, is doing the asset and tenancy management of. That is going gangbusters, and it's just a beautiful example of when we all hold hands and, sing kumbaya and great things happen. So thank you for that. So Tracy and Caroline are going to bring the presentation today, and then without me jumping up again, I'm going to hand over to Leonie to do the thanks, and also a special announcement today of a program that we are officially launching today for women in property, and you will hear about that. So no mai haere mai, get comfortable. If you don't know the person next to you, while I do the mic change, shake hands, greet them, make sure you know who's around you. And it's my great pleasure to hand over to Tracy Taylor. Thank you.
On this one. Okay, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko mangere te manga e te whara nei, ko Waitemata, toko hononga e tēnei whenua, e tupu o no tahataha o Waikato, he uri aho no Ireland, Scotland and Senegal, ko tamaki makoto te Kāinga noho, ko Tracy Taylor, toko ingoa. So hi everyone, and thank you to my dear friend Sue for the warm welcome. We really appreciate being asked along here today to talk to you a bit about who Kāinga Ora is now, what we've been through, but also a bit of myth busting, because there's quite a bit of that about us in the market, I think, that needs to be done. Often you get one side of the story through some of the other channels. So please feel free to ask questions, and any question is okay. And Caroline and I are going to share a bit today. But first I'm just going to start with giving you a few sort of key data points of who we are as an organisation. So Kāinga Ora is a Crown entity. Now that is different from a government department because we have a board. So we have a board that governs us, but we also report into two ministers, actually, Minister of Housing and the Minister of Finance. So we are a commercial delivery agency for the government. And we are pretty big. So if we were listed on the stock exchange, you can see we're sort of the third largest that we've got, bigger than some of the other organisations like Fonterra and Fertil. So we are large, about 46 billion in assets, 78,000 homes, and we have about 200,000 tenants across our homes. Now, what's really key to remember about us also is that part of the transformation that we've just been through has been us getting back to our core mission. So we are here to build and renew homes for the government, on behalf of the government, for different reasons. We'll get a bit into that detail soon, and to be a landlord in terms of the people that live in those homes. And that's a really key part. And I'll talk a bit about why that gets a bit misunderstood, or how that gets a bit misunderstood later also. What's really important is that we're working hard to home people across New Zealand. And every working day in FY25, we deliver around 16 new or upgraded homes for whānau in need. And every working day we place around 33 individuals or families in our homes. We have about 70,000 kids in our homes, and we partner with, as Sue was saying, with community housing providers, with oranga tamariki, with health, with corrections, with a lot of the other services to home people across the motu. Put that there. Gone too far. So one of the things that I did just want to touch on also is there's sometimes a bit of a misconception about who our tenants are. So our tenants are mostly, the majority, wonderful people who just need a bit of a hand sometimes, and not so different from all of us. And that's really important to remember. Most of them look after our homes really well and are very proud to be in them and very grateful to be in them, and are doing their best to work through that system. And one of the things that I often think about, and one of the things that's been really important to me in terms of getting into the CE role, is how do we become part of the system that enables this in a bigger way? And as Sue said, work together. And it's a big push actually from this government to be thinking about how we make that entire system more accessible for people and easier to work with. So it was sort of quite widely known that last year we went through what we called a reset plan. Minister Bishop often referred to it as the turnaround plan. But basically, after the Bill English review, we were instructed to do better commercially and to think about how we were organising ourselves and what we were delivering. So that was actually a really good push in many ways. And I came along, as Sue said, into the organisation. Matt Crockett was our transitional CEO, who some of you will know, who has just left us in December. And I came in alongside Matt to help, and the exec team to help really drive that transformation. But we needed to just really refocus on what our core mission was. We had got sort of off down a few other paths that weren't really serving the people that we were there to serve, or weren't commercially viable for us to be involved in. We needed to get better at how we were managing tenancy. But I do want to, this is a myth that I want to bust. There is no magical sort of legal world that we exist in. We have to operate within the Residential Tenancies Act like anybody else does. So if we have disruptive behaviour within our homes, it takes us 90 days. We have to go through that process. We have to go to court. We have to have all the evidence. So all of those things apply to us as well. But there were definitely things that we needed to do better in that space. And some of the key points around that were disruptive behaviour and the management of that, but also how we were helping our tenants who were in rental debt and what that looked like. And I'll talk a bit more about that soon. We had to think about how we were improving our housing portfolio. So what's really key when we are a large asset manager, 78,000 homes, that's a lot. So it's not just important that we build more, we need to make sure that the assets we have are up and running in the best way that they can be. And at the moment, over 50% of our portfolio is over 50 years old. So that needs some investment. And the best way that we could do that was recycle capital. So we needed to sell some things that didn't make sense for us to have, to be able to think about how we are looking after the portfolio that we have. We need to think about our improved organisational performance. So internally, what was important to our culture, and actually how are we thinking about that, and what were we talking to our internal people about being important? And I'll talk a bit more about that soon. And just overall improved financial sustainability. We had got ourselves into a very large debt profile, and that wasn't going to be sustainable. So in terms of some of the results that we have now delivered, so the reset plan was ended at the end of last year, and that has sort of been officially closed off, which has actually been really helpful in terms of not that we are now just stopping transforming, but actually we have now got more time to think about how to do that in the best way for our tenants, for our people, and sort of in a more sort of long-term view. But we definitely already have, and there's a scorecard which I'll show you later on in the presentation. We've got better tenancy outcomes. and our tenants are reporting that to us through our surveys. Caroline's going to talk to you about the housing delivery side and some of the targets that we're meeting there. We have a reshaped workforce. There's still some more work to do on that, and we are stepping now into modernising our technology. That was a key thing for us also. We had very old tech, and we were able to get a business case across the line last year, which we are self-funding. We are not going into the government's wallet for, but that will be life-changing, not only for our people internally, but for our tenants. We had certain cost savings targets that were set, particularly around our debt profile, and we have exceeded those. And that's really important because that money doesn't just recycle back into our organisation, which some of it does, but equally it returns it to the wider treasury for all of us to use across the system. Rent debt is at a much more acceptable level, and that's really important because it was very difficult on people who were let sort of to get into large amounts of debt. That's very hard for people to live that way. So we've put in processes where we're helping them work through that. We did do a rent debt forgiveness piece, but actually that was very small in comparison to what we're now seeing our people being able to manage themselves. Build costs have come down, and we got to a point again where, we were sort of perhaps thinking too in an imbalanced way, I would put, around how we were building and what materials we were using, rather than thinking about actually what's the balance between what does good look like and what is cost efficient. So we've brought that balance back, and Caroline will talk a bit more about that. And we did need to think, we had a lot of projects in the pipeline that weren't just that sort of didn't sit in our core mission. And we needed to stop doing some of those, and whether that's through selling land or others taking over that part of our business. And so we did a bit of that sorting through also. And so we're now in a really good position where the deficit that we have is reducing. And again, I'll show you the scorecard in a minute. But equally, that's built us good credibility, and you have to have the money to do good with it. So that is a positive place for us to be. I just do want to touch on improved tenants outcomes, because as part of this, it hasn't just been about cost out and money. It's been about our customers and how can we do better for them, and what does good look like for them. So as you can see, in terms of tenants feeling safer and satisfied with their homes, those are very high results. And our key is, our goal is to maintain those as we continue to transform and change the business over the next few years. We have now over 3,000 tenants who are no longer in debt and managing their debt. And so that is a much better place for them to be. And we have a very high occupancy rate. 99% of our homes are occupied. But I do want to say, when you are a large asset manager, and again, I want to stress this, it is very normal that you do have at some time homes that are empty because they need to be done up, or you have just moved someone out and you're waiting to move someone in, or that doesn't happen in a day. Those things, sometimes there's a month or so while you're able to do that. And so that's a really important thing to understand. And we're actually starting to talk about our portfolio now in terms of 78,000 plus or minus 1%, because at any point in time, there are some of those homes which are not occupied, or we are building or selling or doing up. And that's just a normal thing for a large asset manager to do. I'll pass over to Caroline now, who's going to talk about our build program.
Thanks, Tracy. Tracy was just talking about the importance of the tenancy management side of the business and the real focus that we have on the customers that live in our homes. Equally as important, though, is making sure that we're really strong, responsible asset managers, right? So we've got these 78,000 homes right across the motu that we're responsible for managing. And as Tracy mentioned, 50% of them are more than 50 years old. So we want to make sure our customers have good quality homes to live in that they can be proud of. And so one of our key focus points at the moment is renewing that portfolio and trying to reduce that average age down. And we do that in several different ways, which I'll talk about. So we retrofit our homes. So that's taking an old end-of-life home and we do quite an intensive renovation on it. And it effectively gives it like decades more life, a new lease on life. And so tenants can move back in and have a much healthier experience. So we call that retrofitting. And we also redevelop our portfolio. So you might have a house that's end of life, or it's like not in the right location, or it's not at the right intensification. So we might demolish it or relocate it somewhere else and then redevelop that existing site and put maybe 3 homes where there might have just been one, so that we can house more families and make sure that they've all got a place to call home. We also add to our portfolio by working with developers to buy turnkey house and land packages, which obviously changes our land footprint a little bit. So we use all of those mechanisms to make sure we've got new homes that have really good economic lives ahead of them. To help us with that and help fund it, we also sell homes that are end of life. And one of the more infamous examples, which we're really delighted with, is Trinity Street. You might have seen it in the media. The house was next door to Lord's. When we sold that, that provided us with enough funds to retrofit just over 12 of our older houses in our portfolio. So we're no different to a private sector asset manager. You need to have those rights. This is nothing new. We're just doing the divestment side at a slightly larger scale than we've done in the past. So this year to 30 June, we'll sell somewhere between 900 to 1,000 homes, but we'll reinvest those funds into making sure that we've got a new lease on life in some of our older homes, and that we're buying new homes or building new homes so we can house people in the right locations in the homes that they need. Let me magically click the clicker. I'm going to let you do that because it's that thing, right? And then you do it and then it overdoes it. All right. So I was going to talk a little bit about the transformation program over the asset delivery side of the business. And we really made 3 key shifts to drive efficiency into everything we do. And those of you that know me know efficiency is part of my DNA. When the family comes around and I'm making pike clips for everyone and I triple the mix, I literally have 3 frying pans out so that I can do it faster and more efficiently. So this is the part of the mahi that I really do love. But we made 3 key shifts. First of all, we took the end-to-end process through the design, consenting and delivery of our housing, and we eliminated all of the wasted time out of it. People call it lean, but a Kaizen. There's a lot of management consultancy speak around it, but basically you go through and you eliminate all of the wasted effort, all of the rework, and you make sure work just goes downstream, task after task after task. We went from taking about 3 years on average to getting, I can pull a project, we can get it designed, we lodge for resource consent, engineering plan approval, and then building consent, and we're averaging 31 days. And our construction cycle times are averaging 104 days for projects 20 units or less. Anyone that does property, they're going to go, wow, that is fast. Obviously, we're still part of the ecosystem, and the bits where we interface with the system, we're still working on. So, you know, we experience the same legislative processes around resource consents and engineering plan approvals, working with all of the utility providers at the end of the construction to get everything connected up. So we've looked to ourselves first, gone, what can we do better? And now we're working with our partners in the ecosystem to go, how can we make their lives easier and really speed up those processes? So we went after time first, and then we went after the money. So Tracy will show the results shortly, but we were averaging build costs per square metre of just under 3,500 back in 2024. We've got a year-end target that's just under 3,000, so $2,980 a square metre, and we're well on track to hit that, and some of our more recent contract rates are well below that. But how did we do it? One of the key things that we did was we drove these optimised, standardised plans. So if you look at the two plans on the right, you'll see the optimised one is all about efficient use of space. So how does the customer live in the home? How do you eliminate wasted hallways, which just cost materials, take time, but don't add to the living experience of the customer of the home? And they're all designed to minimise, like the number of cuts in the wall board. It's all, the windows are all standardised. Nothing magic, it's all really simple, but the best things in life are simple, and it's been the most transformational for us previously. There was a lot of bespoke designs, and anyone that's built their own home, no doubt you will have done a bespoke design yourself. It's not a very cost-effective way of doing things, and it certainly takes you longer. So a real focus on standardizing those designs. It makes them repeatable, it speeds up the consenting process, and it also means that we can use our purchasing power when we go to buy materials, because we can standardize the materials that we use in our home. So all very good common sense, nothing revolutionary, but the trick is to put processes and systems in place to make sure that it's really strongly embedded and that the teams drive to that discipline. And then the third shift that we made was really around smarter procurement. So some of that bulk purchasing I talked about, making sure we're running multi-bid processes. We put a little bit of time in the process to make sure that we're talking to our partners and we're really extracting the value that we can by being really informed purchasers of that supply chain. So really delighted both with the cycle time improvements, but also the cost improvements that we've seen right across the board. I think back to you.
Thanks, Caroline. I thought it might be interesting just to give you just a really quick demonstration of how we ran our transformation last year to the reset plan, because we had some quite key targets that we needed to meet, and we'll see the scorecard in a moment. But one of the things that I always find with transformation is often organisations say, right, we're in transformation, let's go everybody. And there's really no sort of tools or guidelines or plans around what that actually means. And so we ran a really tight ship around that. And we organised our transformation office in sort of verticals in terms of the key delivery areas within our organisation. And then we sort of had as the horizontals the bits that were really important as platforms to be able to deliver that. So org health, for instance, and that was the sort of cultural piece that was really important to be making sure was coming alongside of some of the more sort of hard-coded transformation. And within each of the verticals, what we did was we had workstream leads, so people were responsible for delivering within those verticals. And then we also had what we called initiative owners. So anybody in the organisation actually could come up with an idea. It would be run through the system. And if it was an idea that we decided all to go with, then that person would own that initiative and be driving that alongside the workstream lead. It's an excellent way to get all of the org involved in that change that you want to see. Now, of course, also alongside of it, we had to do a large FTE change. So we were about 3,500 people when I first came to the organisation. We're now about 2,300. So a big part of that was a large change program that we had to do, but also some of that has been through alignment, people leaving and different projects coming on and off. But that was a really important part. I think, as Sue mentioned, government organisations get directed to do different things under different governments, and Kāinga Ora had certainly been asked to do that under the previous government. And I think sometimes extreme growth or fast growth can be as difficult to manage as the downsizing. So that was sort of something which had happened. And in terms of the culture, there were some key things which sort of had got a bit lost along the way, like having good performance frameworks in place, thinking about what does the REM structure look like, some good rigor around hiring, and just some of those key indicators of doing good business that we needed to just make sure were sort of back in place. So we did that through the org health stream, and now, we'll evolve that. We did some really good cultural stuff also alongside of it, but we did need to just sort of get ourselves back to the basics a little bit in terms of culture. External spend. So obviously we are big, so we have lots of things that we buy, and we need to be really sure that we are thinking about who we're buying from, why we're buying, what we're paying for it, not just on the build side of our business, but across the organisation. And that was something that we really needed to sort of get some rigour around, and that sat within that external spend piece. And labour and productivity. We needed to bring some, I'm a big fan of strategic workforce planning. We plan a lot around the financials of an organisation, but we often forget to do it around the people. And it's really important that you've got a strategy around that and sort of thinking about that, 2, 3, 4 years down the track. So that was the system we used. All of the exec team were sponsors of that, and a good majority of our organisation was a part of it. And our board were certainly keeping us, were measuring us through this system. One of the other things that we brought in, so we are public servants. I take that really seriously, and there is a code of conduct and we are stewards of taxpayers' money. So it really matters what we do every day and the decisions that we make. So we brought in what we called the owner's mindset. And these are just sort of some of the key things that we really focused our culture around whilst we were doing the change, and that still exist with us today. And we found that were really good tools for our leaders to be able to use to be really clear with people around what we expect. And, even little things when, if that was your budget and your money, would you pay that for that? Or would you buy that in that way? Or if this was your family that you were putting into that home, would you be happy with that? So those things were key questions that we were asking as part of our transformation. And one of the things that, I've got a private sector background mostly, and a commercial background, is we sort of had to teach people to challenge with respect. Be expected to be asked why or how or when, and that's okay, and be ready to respond, and do things at pace sometimes, because that's what we need to do. So we sort of brought some of that rigour into our organisation. These are just some of our wonderful people who work for us, working hard. And I do want to say that there's also, I think a little bit less now, but certainly in the past, that our people weren't perhaps doing the best that they could. So our people do an incredible public service on the behalf of New Zealanders every day. Often they are in very high-risk situations, particularly our frontline people, and they care deeply about those outcomes. Whenever we have to evict somebody from our properties, it breaks their hearts. I see it, because they all have to come up to me. I have to approve all evictions. We don't do those lightly. And the people in our corporate offices are working incredibly hard to make sure that we are doing things in the best way that we can. So I do want people to understand that. So this was, it's always good to have some measures, particularly when you're delivering to a plan that is very high profile. So this was the scorecard that we developed, and Marie, our head of comms, is here, and I know that it is the bane of their lives because every month for the past year or so, or every quarter, we've had to bring one of these out, and they're a lot of work, and we have to make sure that obviously the information behind them is right. So, but this is sort of our most recent one, and as you can see, we're in pretty good shape. If you were an organisation our size, you'd be pretty proud of some of those, and I won't talk about all of them because some of them are a little bit boring, I get it, like interest cover and stuff, but really did matter in terms of what we were trying to achieve. But as you can see, our build cost come down significantly, and that's already on a trajectory. We're actually at less than that already, but it's just flowing through the system. The other key one on that, I think, is the disruptive behaviour. So we're sort of making really good progress in that space, and you know, the rental debt, which I mentioned before. Another key one, which I'm also very proud of, is our overhead cost to total revenue is much more in line with now what it should be than what it was. And what this has done, and our net deficit actually is incredible. We are doing a great job in that space, and that will have its peaks and troughs as we go through tech modernisation and different things, but that's another key marker that we are managing our finances in a much better way than we were. We used FY24 as a baseline for this. So, you know, as we sort of move away from the reset plan, some of our key measures will look different, but we're really proud of what we've achieved in the time that we have achieved it. So just to finish, I think this is our last slide. As I said, it's really important to me and to us that we are doing what we do with dignity and fairness, that the homes that we are building are not only warm and safe, but actually in the right places at the right time for the right people. That we set clear expectations about who we are and what we're here to do and not to do, and that we are forming genuine partnerships. So being part of that system is really important for us because we can't be responsible for everything. So just to remind you, we build and renew our homes. We are the landlord, but we are not mental health providers. We are not we're not police, we're not corrections. So we need to work within the system to make sure that that works the best way it can, but we certainly can't be responsible for all of that all of the time. So that's a really important thing for us. So I think without further ado, Sue, did you want us to do questions before we pass to Leonie? Yeah, so we'll take some questions. Hi, how are you? Good. I'm from Beulah. Yeah. Okay. Yes, we can share. Just introduce yourself using the microphone and then.
Yes, thank you. Momita here. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Great conversation. I'm from Dulux, and you were earlier speaking about 50% of your property portfolio either needs to be sold or renovated, mostly renovated. And a few of the things that you were listing or wanting to draw a balance is how they look good and cost efficiency. And does sustainability and sustainable materials feature anywhere there?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I'll take that one. So like everything in life, it's a trade-off, right? And like any business, you have different peak priorities at any one time. You've got to make sure that nothing gets out of balance. So at our core, we're really striving for good quality homes. And we're looking, we're always looking at the longevity of the materials that we use. We're looking at everything from a whole of life perspective. So we're always going, I'm never going to spend money on the cheap thing up front if I've got to go and redo it every 5 years. If I can spend a little bit more now and it's going to last me 50 years. So the business is always looking at those types of trade-offs. As Tracy mentioned, we're subject to different political priorities at different particular times. So do we have any public targets around sustainability? No, but as long-term asset owners, of course, we're looking at all of the things that are best for the customers that live in our homes, and looking at that long-term asset ownership. So hopefully that sort of answers your question.
Thank you so much.
I'll just add to that too. One of the things that we're thinking about is obviously how they look. So we wonder if sometimes we have gone a little bit far down that track, and we bring it back in terms of aesthetics as well. Some of our properties are really beautiful. There's one out in Henderson, Community Lane, which I encourage everybody to go and have a look at, where we've got some wonderful greenery, and the buildings themselves are lovely. But it's always, as Caroline said, it's a bit of a trade-off.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
next project.
Yeah.
Kia ora, I am Stella. I'm from Eco Choice Aotearoa, which is a natural segue from Mo's question, because we certify and verify Dulux products and other built environment products. We did not plan this, and have had long conversations and partnerships with different people at Kāinga, which we appreciate. Just on the, I guess, different assumptions or myth busting about sustainable products, which I'm sure you two are well aware of, but for the benefit of the room, probably. I'd love to hear how you apply and use that life cycle approach of total cost of ownership of the materials that you purchase, because there's a big assumption out there that sustainable products always cost more. And there's a recent World Bank data specifically for buildings and built products. By 95% of the time, it will always be cheaper. And as recent as year 5, it's the cheaper option. So as the biggest landlord and construction developer or property developer, I think Kāinga has a massive role to ensure, or not ensure, to break that myth, and how environmental and social outcomes can be delivered through purchasing better products. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, great. So I think there were 2 parts to that maybe, but in terms of how the team assesses things, so we have the small high-performing, nailing it team that are very disciplined about understanding the products that we specify into our homes, and they do a real deep dive process into it, and they'll go, what's the upfront cost? What's the manufacturer's recommendation on the frequency? If it's roofing, how often do you have to clean it? If it's painting, how often do you have to repaint it? What type of cladding is it? All of those things. And they're always looking at that upfront cost versus assumptions around that cost of that forecasting. You're right, we had an example recently around some lower carbon concrete that actually I think the teams were expecting to be 50% more expensive, and actually it was really quite in the margins. So it is surprising at times what you find. You also find things, I call them sincerely held beliefs, that are then actually wrong. So you can think something is going to be more cost effective in the long run, and then actually it's not. So also I try and be really open-minded about it and not have too many assumptions, because I've definitely thought things before that have proven not to be true. But I agree, generally, if you're a long-term asset owner and you're looking at the whole of life costs of things, often truly sustainable products are thinking like that too. So the cost efficiency is there. As a gross generalization. The second bit was a bit about what role do we play in sort of talking about that more openly in the market. And I'd say at the moment we don't really at all, but that's something for us to have a think about. Yeah. Grab my card at the end.
Kia ora, I'm Kristen from the Centre for Strategic Philanthropy. So this is a completely different question. It's probably one for you, Tracy. Your point was very well made about the role of Kāinga being as a builder and a landlord, and it's not health, it is not justice, it's not education, etc. But my question is more around to what extent is there collaboration or interface with government agencies, noting that you're also not a government agency, but you are a vehicle potentially for delivery of some of the interventions that other agencies are looking to deploy. So if I think about something that health is trying to do and reach their people, or MSD or anybody like that, education, you are, for many of your tenants, a trusted intermediary. To what extent do you still act as a vehicle or a channel and collaborate with the government agencies in delivering broader government sort of mandated interventions or priorities, really?
Yeah, really good question. And the reality is that we're doing it every day, simply because we need to. And as you say, we are often there, first there. But what we're trying to do much better, and this is the systems thinking and the systems approach, which I want us as a whole of government to be much more aware of and able to do. And a lot of it comes down to data sharing or systems. And that's something that definitely with tech modernisation we have to be aware of, is that we are setting up the same systems where we can share and more easily enable this. But we're doing it every day. Our people are doing it every day. Sometimes I worry because we're doing too much and we have to, because we're often there. But our people interact really well with those agencies on the ground, and at an operational level it's happening in a great way. It comes down again to, and it's not all about the money, but often we're not funded for a lot of what we are doing. And then we run into trouble in other places, or simply, we're putting a lot of pressure on our people when they haven't got the skill sets or the training to be in the situations that they're often in. So it's a balance of things. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm actually from an organisation called Synergia that we work in health and social sector. And my question is really similar, and particularly from a mental health support lens, really understanding how your people are educated, I suppose, on the free community mental health programs that are available, and how that is, educated, or is there a booklet that's left in your homes, or how is that actually educated? Because I imagine when you think about the, kind of other government agencies, they'd be pretty rapt to know if, 90% of your Kāinga order tenants were enrolled with a GP, for instance. So a little bit more information about that would be really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something. So we do welcome packs and all of that stuff with all of that information for our people. But remember too that we can't overstep that line of a landlord. So there's sort of a lot of legislation that exists around that too. We can't tell people they have to go and get enrolled with a GP, or we can't tell people that they need to get help with their mental health, but often in reality we're in there and we're helping and we're advising and we're doing lots of things, but the legislation isn't there to protect us on that or to help us do that. And so I think it's about obviously thinking about what can we do in the moment, and obviously we are connected into all of the, we've been doing this a long time and we do it en masse, the systems that we need to be, but equally to get the best outcomes for some of our tenants, we need that system to be connected, and we need to think about how that works in the best way. Often what happens too, and this is what a lot of people don't know, so we don't control the wait list, that's with MSD, Ministry for Social Development. So we don't pick and choose who comes into our homes. We get told who comes into our homes. We do our best to go, well, actually, these people probably would be better living here, or this would be a better environment for these people. But that's not something we're in absolute control of. So often also we're in situations where there are people in our homes who we weren't aware perhaps had mental health issues or whatever, and we need to work that out as we go. So it's sort of a bit difficult at times, but we do our best. But equally, I think the whole system, which again comes down to a lot of data sharing and people like myself, our operational people often do a very good job, but we've got to enable them as leaders to be able to do that more easily. Yeah.
Kia ora. Appreciate the kōrero. I'm Cheryl from Culture Movers, so I deal with organisational culture, but I also have another hat on, which is I volunteer with Citizens Advice. So I see a lot of people coming through the door around housing. I'm just interested, and I want to follow on from the question that's just been. You said that MSD make a lot of the decisions. Do you see in the future, or can you see in the future, where Kāinga ora would be better off making those decisions? How do you see that flowing from?
It's a good question, and I think it's certainly not one that's not being asked, and it's not just about us, but about actually how does the system work in a different way or better. So those discussions are being had. They haven't been solved or anything decided yet. But I think a collaboration is probably the best way, because then we don't get too distracted from what we're here to do and do that well. But equally, we can then, there's a lovely example in some of our properties where we've had a bit more say in who's sort of in them, and we're able to sort of put some elderly people with perhaps some single parents, and that works really well, and you find you never have any problems at those homes, and the community supports each other, and it can be a really lovely outcome. So that's sort of, I think, that sweet spot that we'd like to see.
Yeah, that's a big question that comes through the door, especially in Citizens Advice, is how is this weighted? How do they put me to the top, or I go to the bottom of the list?
And that is MSD who do that, yeah.
Hi, I'm Tracy Finlayson from the Ministry of Education. So this is more a question for Caroline. You were speaking about, in relation to the construction program, you were looking at time and cost and standardisation. This is a big topic for us in the property sector for the ministry as well. And what I was interested in understanding a bit more was about your procurement strategies, which you mentioned briefly. So what procurement strategies did you implement, and how did those procurement strategies either support cost, time, or standardisation? And definitely interested if you were procuring, for instance, materials, what materials, why did you decide a particular pathway? So yeah, just obviously very relevant to us, and definitely keen to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, lots of questions. So what, like, you should grab me afterwards and we'll catch up for coffee, because I could talk about this for hours and I'll probably bore everyone else to tears, but you sound as excited about it as me. So always like to find a kindred spirit. But at its highest level, the way I think about the procurement piece is we have these 78,000 homes across the motu, right? And we have quite sophisticated, we call them national supply agreements, that really aggregate our demand from a maintenance perspective, because you're maintaining a significant volume of homes in any one year in both a planned and a reactive maintenance kind of a way. And we've been looking at how do we dovetail those supply arrangements into our new build space, because you end up with this dichotomy, right? If you just let developers go and build whatever they want, you end up with a whole mix of new products that you then turn into a 50-year maintenance schmozzle, right? Because you don't actually know what's in your homes. So we've been really stepping in and mandating a lot more into those upfront builds, so that we're balancing that whole of life perspective end to end. There's a number of other things that we've done, but I'm more than happy to kōrero with you afterwards. I'm getting the look from Sue. But yeah, come and find me. I'd love to have a chat.
Yeah, we'd love to share. So, welcome.
Very much. Stay there. No mai haere mai, ko Leonie Freeman toka wingua. And it's my great pleasure to be able to say thanks today to both Caroline and Tracy. I'm sure for all of you in the room today, it's been an interesting insight into what's been going on at Kāinga ora. A lot of change and a lot of challenges, but you can see that they are doing it with grace, professionalism and care for the people that they are looking after. When you see the statistics shown up there, you know, they just seem big numbers, 78,000 homes, but 200,000 people. And every one of those people have a story.
And 12 years ago, I think Sue touched on, I spent some time in Housing New Zealand. I was brought in for the opposite situation to turn the development program around because they'd built 50 houses the year before on a portfolio of 68,000. So there were definite problems. But the thing that I still remember to this day is it is really important that we resolve this issue for the benefit of all New Zealanders. And there are so many stories that had an impact. And two things really stuck out to me. The staff that work at Housing New Zealand and KO are angels, particularly those in the front line, because it's very, very challenging, but they are so committed and they care. And I still remember to this day one story, and we were opening a new housing development, and it was a sort of an apartment block with a number of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. And I met this lady, and I remember her because she was a similar age to my mum at the time. So she was in her late 70s. My mum now is 91, still alive. But I met this lady, she was in her late 70s, and she'd been living in a 3-bedroom, standard, old, typical Housing New Zealand house, cold, damp, on a 1/4 acre section. And she had major health problems, and she told me that she regularly went to the hospital at least every 2 to 3 weeks with respiratory problems. She moved into one of these brand new 1-bedroom apartments. For the first time, she was part of a community, and she told me, because she actually grabbed my hand at the opening and showed me around her apartment. She was really proud of it. But she hadn't gone to the hospital once since she moved into that apartment. So I know that what is happening and what the impact you can do is really, really critical, because that is just one story out of so many. And the public never see it in the media. You never hear about any of this stuff. But what they are doing is really important. So, I really congratulate you both on your hard work and mahi in this space, because for everyone operating in this is such a critical issue. This fundamental thing around housing is so important for all of us in New Zealand. I think when we think about leadership, it always comes back to purpose. And I know Tracy and Caroline are driven by purpose. I think I'm much the same. I think my time at Property Council has been the same. I went in there because I wanted to fix some things in property, particularly housing. And the second one for me is I want to and continue to shift the diversity and inclusion in our sector. I've been in property my whole career. I've done every bit of that you could possibly imagine. And we all know there's not a lot of senior women leaders in our space. And so I'm working really hard to do that. One of the things at Property Council that we launched a couple of years ago was a program called Develop You, and that with a U. And that is our training academy. And I come from a family of 2 teachers, so I think somewhere in there it was ingrained to educate and train. And I've lectured at universities over the years part-time to contribute back to the sector. So we launched this. At the moment, we run a range of courses. There's sort of fundamentals of property development, valuation, property management. There's advanced courses. We run leadership courses and other things. And so one of the things that we are just, and I've been going for the last couple of years, and we're building space. But this year we've introduced a new initiative in conjunction with Sue, and we have launched a program with Property Council and Connected Leadership with Sue's Connected Leadership course. So again, it follows a similar program to those who have done it before. It'll be 6 sessions this year, pretty much 1 a month, looking at a whole raft of key issues in that leadership space for women in property. So I just encourage anyone that's interested in that to touch base with Sue or ourselves at Property Council, and we can give you more information. Because I do think that, I talk to lots of women in our sector, and I often talk about mobilising an army, because we all change things in our sector, firstly by doing the jobs that we do. Every time you front up to work and you do the job that you do, you are making a difference in our sector. But there's also ways that we also all want to learn and grow, particularly in that leadership space. And I know sort of it's that natural thing for women. You think, firstly, I'm going to wait to be asked, or, you know, all those things that I don't have and maybe there's someone better. I just always encourage people, put your hand up. You know, if there's a promotion going along, put your hand up, even if you don't get it. You know, speak an event, build your brand, take opportunities to learn and grow, because this is a whole journey. So I just mentioned that in this little opportunity. It's a very long thank you, isn't it? And I've gone off on a tangent, but I did want to also, you know, talk about this connected leadership with Property Council while I had the opportunity today. So if anyone wants any more information, like I said, come and talk to Sue. But I'm going to come back to where I started, and again, thank Caroline and Tracy for their fantastic presentation. Again, what you are doing, you know, is so critical, and I only have the greatest respect, because there is a lot of challenges, but you can see, despite the challenges of working in this environment, they lead with purpose, they lead with empathy, and they are creating massive change, which is so critical for all of us in New Zealand. So please join with me in thanking Caroline and Tracy.
Kia ora, Leonie, Tracy, Caroline, thank you so much. I knew there were lots of customers of Kāinga Ora in the room. I saw you coming in. I do want to thank Alberts as well, who provide our beautiful space and hosting today. And I know this space, if any of you are looking for beautiful event spaces in the city, Connected Leadership is a member of Alberts. We also have a very special membership offer. So all you have to do, it's free to join Connected Leadership. We can get you a special deal at Alberts. And as a way to support them, we really encourage you to use spaces. There are many of them, large and small. Thank you all for coming. And I just wanted, the last thing to say, we have a little bit, you know, we remember the term NIMBY that came in. As a community and social public housing provider, and in terms of the boards that I've been on, some of the resistance is people saying, we really believe in public housing and we're very concerned about homelessness and people not having a place to live, and houses are so expensive, but please don't build any in our street. Yeah, it's true. And I can say with absolute fidelity that every time we've done a development, and I've done, I don't know, maybe 500 houses now in the last 14 years in Tāmaki Makaurau, they're the best houses on the street, and not the worst street, the best houses. They're beautifully maintained. And because we're building communities, not just dwellings, and that really came through in your corridor, we are an absolute asset into the community, because often our people are at home and they're looking out for their neighbours, and they're generous of spirit, and we've got community gardens and all kinds of really cool stuff happening. So if you're lucky enough to have any kind of community housing in your rohe, your street, your neighbourhood, whether it's Kāinga Ora or whatever, go and say hi. And when you see the building being opened, please go and welcome your neighbours, because they will be some of the best neighbours you've ever had. And if there's a community meeting saying, oh, it looks like Kāinga Ora want to come and build in our street, you say, that'd be awesome. Yeah? Kia ora, everyone. Stay for a cup of tea. Thank you.